Well, that's how the markets have opened. A sharp rise of about 3/4 of a percentage point, and the Bank Nifty up almost 0.91%. And it's a very nice occasion and moment to welcome our market master for the day, Ridham Desa, Head of India Equity Research and Strategy at Morgan Stanley. He's joining us from the ongoing Morgan Stanley India Summit, the 17th Summit. Good morning, Ridham. Nice of you to find time for us in what should be a very, very busy hour for you. The markets have held on at 8,000. Does that warm your heart, or do you think that this is only for the moment and there are more falls to come?
Good morning, Lata. Good morning, Sonia. Happy to be back on CNBC. No, I don't want to comment on this, 8,000 level or 8,100. I have just no expertise to comment on whether this is good or not good. I heard Sudarshan talk about an intraday rally. I think he's far more equipped to actually make that comment. But if I were to just pick up some threads from our conference, what we are seeing here is an unprecedented level of interest in India. Just to quote the numbers, we have a 25% year-on-year growth in investor attendance. This is on top of last year's attendance, which was a record high. Because remember, last year when we were doing the conference in June, it was just after, 2 weeks after the Modi government had come to power. So the interest in India at that time was unprecedented. And on top of that, to get another 25% growth just tells you how much interest there is in India. And I don't want to quote numbers from various regions, but just one number that interests me a lot is I've got a 65% change in attendees from the US. So people have come from all the way from the US in such large numbers to attend. It's a good piece of evidence that there's a huge amount of interest in India.
Oh, wow,
so I think that augurs well for the markets. Yeah, that augurs very well for the markets.
Rhythm, interest is definitely there. People who speak to us tell us that this is the best longer-term story in the emerging markets, or maybe amongst all markets. That keeps coming to us. But is the interest seasoned with any bit of near-term skepticism, much higher than what you saw 1 year ago?
Absolutely, Lata. Absolutely. In fact, I was checking notes from my last year's summit, because when I was writing up yesterday's note, I put a line there that, the skepticism has grown. And then one of my colleagues, said that I just read last year's notes, and it wasn't that we were jumping with euphoria. And I was a bit surprised, because I had different memories from June last year. And then when I checked last year's notes, I found that investors were skeptical even in June last year. And the skepticism then was that the market has gone up a lot, and yes, of course, there's a strong reform-oriented government that has come in. But we have seen this story before. We've seen it in Mexico. We've seen it in other places, and it doesn't quite actually work out that way. So we'll see. Let the government do its job, and we'll come and buy shares. So it's good to be reminded how investors were reacting last year, which is that they had that skepticism. And indeed, this year, a year later, and we tend to forget these things.
No, actually, Ridham, I remember even your skepticism. I remember you saying that, look at the stocks that are going up. It is not yet the cyclicals. It's not yet the economy-oriented stocks.
No,
I remember you saying that.
I also remember Ridham saying that India was the only game in town last year, right? That was what you said when you signed off. And what about now?
Yes, it is. It is still, Sonia. It is still the only game in town, or one of the biggest games in town. But that is a comment for investors who have a 3 to 5 year view. And I don't think, as Lata very rightly pointed out, that has changed. The question here, I think, is what happens in the next few months, and whether investors are going to bid shares at this stage, or are they going to come at a lower level. And that's a harder one to say. They weren't prepared to do it last June. And I don't see that they are that prepared right now as well. They're waiting for more signals. As usual, people want confirmation from the ground. They want confirmation from the indicators. My view is that these confirmation signals will come through in the next 3-4 months. Of course, there are some risk factors. We know them. We know that the rains are a risk. We know that the central bank policy is a risk. We know that the legislative process is a risk. But somehow I get this feeling that a lot of these risks are now priced in, given the correction we have had in the last 3 months. And therefore, when these things actually happen, I think the market will be surprised positively rather than the other way around, which is what we've seen over the last 3 months. So to my mind, I think, I mean, if I were to make a timing call, which I'm terrible at, but if I still went ahead and did it, I think this is a good level to get engaged in the market.
Okay. You know, I'm most interested to hear what the feedback from your conference is with regards to some of the hands-on policy makers that attended your conference, whether it was Anil Swarup, whether it was Suresh Prabhu or even Devendra Fadnavis. On the policy front, what are the key positive takeaways and what more can we expect?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good point, Sonia, because I think what we're getting as a repeated message from policymakers is that they're clearly focused on the long-term story. They're not taking actions which will impact the short run, because those are not policies that matter. What matters is building India's long-term growth story, so that government's decision-making is oriented with a 5-year view. I think that's excellent news. Of course, along the way, a few decisions that will impact, because there are some social projects that are completed, but the government's focus on getting things like infrastructure done, getting things like projects off the ground, I think is intense. And I believe, and if you look at the indicators, capex is turning in the country. Some of that work is paying off. It is paying off in terms of, if you look at the order books of some industrial companies, if you look at the capital good import, if you look at new project launches over the last 3 months, these indicators are actually in a V-shaped recovery. So that's not happening just like that. It's happening because of a lot of cumulative effort from the government. And the other thing that I get a sense is that inflation is of prime importance. So I also understand that there is a huge amount of work going around to anticipate a drought. The preparedness of the government for a drought, I think, is unprecedented. And this is essentially to ensure that we do not get another round of inflation from a potential drought. So these are the two things that I take away, which is the government has got a very keen eye on keeping inflation and not letting the good work on inflation unwind, and at the same time ensuring that we get infrastructure investments with a 5-year view so that India's growth story can be back on track.
I believe there